What's up, everybody, and welcome to the kj52 podcast. First of all, sorry for it's been a little bit lax on my episode game. I apologize for that. I'm back in the swing of things. We have now finished up the Kickstarter for the Jonah movie. We were able to crowdfund that thing at 125%, so yeah. And so if you're tuning in and you haven't had a chance to check out what I got going on over at Patreon, that's patreon.com/kj52. Just about every one of these episodes, I put up like a bonus song or a bonus unreleased track or something like that. So if you go over there and you become a patron, you can get access to a ton of unreleased music, especially stuff that you hear me put on this podcast. All that basically does is just help us pay for the podcast and continue to do what I do. So either way, no pressure to do that. But if you can do something, please go to iTunes and rate and subscribe. That helps me move up the charts and just show up in different search engines and stuff like that. So today's episode is a little bit different than my typical podcast. Most of the ones I've been doing lately revolve either around a message or revolve around a specific album or time musically. I wanted to do something a little bit different. And for those that don't know, I played sports in high school, was never a phenomenal athlete, but sports actually kind of gave me the opportunity to, the first thing, to just share Christ and to be a light. And so sports have always kind of held a kind of a close part in my heart. So I thought I would do something a little bit different for this podcast, as I'm actually going back and interviewing a childhood homie that I used to play football with. This was on the day that I went and spoke at my old high school's FCA. For those who know what FCA is, it's Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And I thought this would just give you guys just a really unique insight into my life as a young believer, way before the music really came into play, of just what it meant to kind of walk that thing out. And so I just thought it was a little bit different. So tune in. I hope you guys dig it. I'm going to put a bonus song on the end. Probably, you know what? I'm just going to put Game Face as a bonus song at the end. That's definitely a sports anthem. So love you guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. God bless.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I can walk on a some. It's just it hurts like mad. So
speaking of hurts, this is a guy who put a hurting on me in high school to the tune of one massive concussion. I'm here with a childhood homie from way back. When I say childhood, I'm talking 1990-ish. I was a sophomore in 90, so that's when 90, probably... Yeah. I don't think I met you that year, but...
what year did you start playing football? Was it 90?
I was 90, but I was JV.
Okay.
You were on varsity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I couldn't put a hurt on you then.
Let's go ahead and establish that from the jump. I'm here with a friend of mine. He is a guy I've known for a very long time, and kind of thought about doing this as I came up here to my old alma mater, which is Mariner High School in Cape Coral, Florida. Every once in a while I've been asked to come up and speak at FCA, which is kind of significant because you and I were FCA brohams, compadres. I was the president, you were the VP, which
Correct.
meant if I died, you had to take over.
Absolutely.
Which, again, going back to the hit that you put on me our senior year, it kind of looks like an inside job if I think about it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But why don't you go ahead and just announce who you are, maybe a little bit.
Mr. Thomas.
Oh, see, that's just a man. You're in a man of authority. He's got a walkie-talkie.
So I'm Robert Butts. I'm currently the principal of Mariner High School, the high school that Jonah and I went to school at. I call him Jonah. Everybody else calls him kj52, so he gives me a hard time. His birth name will always be the name that is special to me. But I had an opportunity to actually, Jonah led me to the Lord in the back of a math class.
Yes.
And so so he's somebody that whenever I share my testimony with people, he's the name that always comes up. His birth name,
right?
Not the new name.
No, well, yeah. The name of the movie is called Jonah, so we're okay.
Oh,
I'm going.
See,
it's all full circle. So that's a great place to start. I think that story is one of the most amazing stories of how God can transform a life in the middle of where you are. And it's funny that, again, coming up here to speak for FCA, football, et cetera, I don't think a lot of people understand what a hotbed Florida is, much less Southwest Florida, for prep football. Out of this area, you've had countless amount of NFL players, certainly Division 1A college players, and at the time, Mariner High School was definitely in the running for that. Do you agree?
Yeah, our senior year, we had five. Was it five? I think it was 1A athletes that graduated from here, all on a full scholarship going somewhere. So yes, South Florida, well, Florida in general.
Right.
When you look at the statistics for college recruiting, football's number one, or Florida's number one for high school football. Texas is number 2, California's number 3, and then Georgia's number 4. So football by far is the number one state for recruiting high school football athletes.
And then of course one of the guys that we played with went on to play for the Bucks.
Greg Spires
went on to play in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And also stole my best friend's hat for Brian Stapp.
Excellent. I didn't know that story, but I
yeah, Brian. Well, Brian always reminds me of that. He's like, I still need a hat back. But anyway, so I think to set the stage would be a good time. So I was brand new to the high school. I had just moved here, and I had also just came to Christ through the radio, and I was like an artistic kid, but kind of like forsook all that artist creative side because I thought the football players were way cooler and they were way more popular. So I decided I was going to be an athlete like 8th grade, which no real experience or background, definitely not the genetics so much for it. But I think I had heart and maybe a dogged determination. But even in sports, that's really not enough.
Oh, it's enough.
It works in the movie Rudy, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's it.
But anyway, I've always looked back at this time and realized that whether or not you're equipped for the job, God can still use you. And I remember at the time being just this very young believer, and I think it was maybe our junior year of high school. We shared a class, right? It was
Correct.
like chemistry class or something like that. And I think you sat right behind me. And I'm just going to brag on Rob because he won't brag on himself. Because he was this lanky, tall, white guy that freaking ran a 4.5 40. And if you understand anything about sports and skill position, it's not usually the white players that are in those type of positions, especially in South Florida where we are a hotbed of great athletes, not necessarily white athletes. So I was really in awe of his ability to not only be a starting wide receiver on our team, but also just his natural ability. It was really something I was very envious of because I was working like crazy to just try and be fast enough to be a wideout, and he's and one thing, again, to have the innate abilities, but he just had a tenacity on the football field. Because if it's to be in a sophomore and to start on a statewide ranked team, that's a big deal. So I was like, dude, I'm just going to mirror this guy because whatever he's doing right. But I also, at the same time, was like, man, I think this guy's really lost. And it was funny, too, because you used to have this, superstitiousness about yourself.
Absolutely. Very superstitious.
And it was weird because you were the starting wide receiver, but what was the thing that you felt plagued you? I remember you sharing this.
I don't remember.
You said that every time you caught a pass in a game, we lost.
No.
That wasn't it?
No, that's not it because I had never caught a pass.
You had never caught a pass. That's what it was.
What it was.
You had never caught a pass in a game.
Because there was all of this hype surrounding me going into to my junior year,
right?
About this great wide receiver that's a junior and he's going to do great things. And I want to say we were 3 or 4 games into it and hadn't caught a pass. That's what was plaguing me.
Yeah, and that is darn near torture.
Oh yes,
to a wide receiver.
Absolutely.
And the team was, I think we were in the top 5 in the state.
Yep.
So to be there. And did you feel like you were going to lose your position at some point? Or
No.
did you just feel like it just never seemed to work out?
It just never... There was always something that was bugging me, like an emptiness that, it's not like they weren't throwing the ball to me.
Yeah.
I mean, the ball's getting thrown to me, but it was just out of reach. I mean, I remember the week before you led me to the Lord, I remember sitting and watching the film where Brian Cullenbrew, who was our quarterback, overthrows me by about... 10 yards or something like that. And I remember laying out for the ball and hitting the ground with my arms extended, laying flat on the ground. I remember watching the film and just looking at myself going, that's me.
What else do I have to do?
Yeah, look at me. I'm sprawled out. I'm laying flat on my face, and the ball's rolling away from me, and I'm just laying there going, what do I have to do to actually get the ball?
To get my position.
To me, yeah. So it was such a frustration.
Yeah.
And the Lord used that circumstance to bring me to the lowest of lows.
Isn't that funny?
Yep.
That how we have to and it's funny too, especially as an athlete, you put so much of your identity.
Yes.
In your performance, in your team, I think every kid that plays sandlot football no matter what position they play. There's nothing more glorious than catching the pass.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what drew me to the position of wide receiver. I loved just, it's like, and it's such, even though football is such a team sport, when you're a wideout, it is a one-on-one thing.
Absolutely.
You have to beat that guy in front of you. There's no one else to help you. There's no block. It's literally your abilities versus his abilities, and hopefully a decent pass. But at the same time, there's such an adrenaline rush, and I think anybody that's ever played wideout, I don't think there's anything that compares to it.
No.
And it's a certain kind of breed. It's a certain mentality. And you have to be fast, but you also have to be reactionary. You have to have great hand-eye coordination, and you still have to be able to block.
Oh, yeah.
And then most high school teams at that time weren't passing the ball at all.
No. I think, well, we were so run-focused that I think we actually only threw the ball 6 or 7 times a game.
Which I didn't understand because I always thought Cullenberg was such a really good quarterback.
Well, and you think about the team that we had. You had Dave Smith, who was the other wide receiver, and Jerome Dixon, who was the tight end.
Right.
And all 3 of us got Division I scholarships. For receiving.
Do you think a lot of that was the coach? Like, he just didn't want to pass the ball? He seemed like Alabama. He could have ran a 4-man wishbone if he tried.
Coach Rolls' philosophy was this. He said 3 things happen when you throw the ball, and 2 of them are bad. So you're either throwing an interception or an incomplete pass. Those are the 2 bad things, or actually completing the ball. Or
you get sacked. I guess you could say 4. So the only reason I want to say all this is because if you haven't played team sports, much less played wideout position, it's a little hard to understand. Because even how good you are, it really still comes down to the pass. You got to have a decent quarterback and a coach that believes in it. So I say all this to set the tone is that I would see Rob just come in every Monday just so frustrated and angry. And I just remember one time, like, you just kept saying GD over and over. And I wasn't the type to be like, how dare you blaster. Right. I was a brand new Christian. So I was like, you have to look at people where they are. And I understood. One, I was like, dang, I'm so envious of his talent, his athletic ability. But 2, to be that close and to not get it. And I started putting myself, and I thought, but yet here I am, this new Christian, and I just remember thinking, or maybe even I said something to the effect of like, whether you get your touchdown or not, in the eternal scheme of things, I'm sure I didn't use this fluffy language. No. I remember essentially saying, in the bigger picture, that really doesn't mean anything. That if you're separated from God, essentially, that is the ultimate missed pass. Do you remember the conversation going something to that effect?
Something similar to that. And I remember going through my mind, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
But then you just it wasn't just one conversation. I believe it was several.
Was it?
That led up to that. But the conversation in the back of the math class, you heard my frustration and and the frustration. And it was something similar to, are you going to get saved or what?
I do remember saying something like that. I was like, you want to get saved right now, right here, in the back of this math? And I think I had said that to many people, or maybe I hadn't. But I just remember being like, I'm just going to roll the dice, because that's what had happened in my life. It was several conversations, but then it was finally just someone just giving me the opportunity.
Right.
And I think when you're like, okay.
Yep.
Or something like that, and I was like, "Oh crap, what do I do now?"
Right, and that's basically what it was, because it was you said that to me, and I remember just stopping.
Oh, sorry. Yes, let me give it.
And and I remember just stopping and thinking, I need what you've been talking about.
Yeah, and it's funny how you can share the gospel with a zillion people, but sometimes it's the right thing at the right time when that person needs it.
Right.
And
because you never know, it's not you, and you never know the circumstances that other person is going through.
Right.
Even they can verbalize all they want, but you never know what's in their heart, and that's what the Lord had been working with me.
And so the funny thing about this was, because I think maybe I had led somebody else to Christ at that point or something like that, and so you do this sort of like, again, you pray the prayer. It's like it becomes this sort of magic formula, which probably isn't always the most best thing at times, but God works even in our screw up, in our sad attempts at doing
most best things.
He draws straight lines with crooked sticks. That's the best way I heard it put. And I remember I'll never forget this. it was like, okay, cool. And then it was like, all right, football. It was the last period of the class.
Yep.
And you just went through your normal routine. It's like, go to the locker room, get changed. And for some reason, I'll never forget this, that day, the news anchor was out.
Correct.
And we used to get a lot of coverage.
Yep.
We used to get a lot of coverage on the news side. And I remember, and of course, I'm sure I was sitting on the sideline watching this happen, because I certainly wasn't starting. And I remember you ran out, and you did this just, I don't know if it was a post to the corner.
It was a post.
See, it's amazing that you remember that too. So it was a post, which I had seen Rob do 1,000 times, and the quarterback hurls it, and just like you had done a zillion times in practice, but this time there was something significant, because at that moment, the guy caught it on video.
Correct. He had just overthrown me ever so slightly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like in the games where he's overthrowing me 10 yards. It was just far enough to where I couldn't just reach up and catch it.
And you did a circus catch.
So I laid out
Yes.
as long and as far as I could, and the ball just landed right in my hands. And they caught it on film and put it on the news that night.
Right. But I remember you coming back, and maybe we were in the huddle or something, and you're like, dude, this Jesus thing works, or something. Like you said something to that effect.
I think that's about
like
what
it was
I said
something
too.
Like there was just I don't know how to compare it, but I could just tell you were just like, at one moment you're like, I was finally validated.
Correct.
And it is true, I believe, that when you delight yourself in the Lord, even in the most smallest way, I think He does give you
Absolutely.
the desires of your heart. And again, to go on with the story, that was your first game. That game
was, well, it was Cape Coral High School,
right,
where we won 55-0, and I tell the testimony I'll tell the testimony to our football players. I had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
The next game we played Cypress Lake. Yeah. I had 2 catches and 3 touchdowns because I recovered a fumble and returned it for a touchdown. Right. The next game was Lemon Bay, and I had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns, and I was averaging like 50 yards a catch or something crazy like that. It wasn't like it was a slant on the goal line.
No, and it was like off to the races, and even me just still being a 16-year-old, I understood that as a young Christian, because I was a young Christian too, how quick you can lose that focus, or you can get distracted, or it can just be just something you ran through and it wasn't really something real. And so I was like, if I don't ever start on this team, if I don't ever contribute on this team or ever play, I was like, if nothing more, I can hopefully be an influence on your life or anybody else on the team for that matter. And then what started to happen is, our receivers coach was also our FCA coach.
Right.
And he started giving me more and more opportunities to like lead a devotional or lead a FCA meeting, and it's freaking hard enough to navigate your high school years, period. But trying to walk it out as a kid that's a young believer, like, I may have had a little bit of a head start on you, but I was always curious to know, like, what was going through your head at that time? Like, what were you thinking about? Like, did you feel like, I feel tempted to go back to the way I was? Or was this like, no, this is something real in my life from here on out?
No, it was, and it's the Lord knew just how to meet me where I was to validate the decision that I had made. And for me, it was football,
right,
which at the time was everything that was everything to
right.
me. And so He validated it, and then it became almost like an addiction of, I want to know more.
Yeah.
Because, and you remember, we used to have conversations in the back of the class where my superstition was combining with spirituality,
right.
and you're probably sitting there looking at listening to my questions going, what are you talking about?
I think football players by nature are superstitious.
Yeah.
And it brings order in a sad,
And it does.
in a chaotic world where you realize like anything could go wrong.
Right. But to answer your question, what was going through my head was I wanted to know more.
Yeah.
And that's why, even after that decision, it was you had the knowledge, and the Lord had given you some wisdom that I wanted more of. And then it became, and you probably saw it. I mean, there was obviously a noticeable difference in me.
Yeah.
But there was the language that I had to overcome.
Right.
That wasn't easy because
right.
it was always a part of what I had done.
Especially as a football player.
Oh yeah.
Especially
absolutely.
when you're FC. Your FCA coach
had the worst language.
Has the worst mouth on the entire
of everybody.
Isn't it funny how even just I mean, it really, if you think about it, they're just words put together. It's not the words themselves; it's what's behind it.
Correct.
But you realize it's like, oh man, like I can't cuss this person out anymore because that's the easy thing to do.
Right.
I've got to do the harder thing, which is like
self-control.
Self-control, and like, do you feel that commitment to Christ at that young age helped you get through your high school years?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. That's because, and the Lord puts it in everybody. When you read God's Word, He talks about, you know, that emptiness that you have that only the Lord can fill.
Right.
And that emptiness was what was tearing me apart before I came to know the Lord.
Right.
And then that fulfillment afterwards. I mean, I wouldn't be here. I am sitting behind the desk of the principal that was the principal.
Isn't that crazy?
That was the principal when you and I were there. And now here I am sitting behind the desk as a principal, and I look back, and that obviously coming to know the Lord is the single most important decision that you'll ever make. But I wouldn't be here if it was not for that decision and everything that happened following, and the Lord laying all of that out in front of me.
So I guess just to kind of pick up from there, so we had a phenomenal junior season. Like that team made it to regionals and then literally became one game away from going to state. You're right, one literal play. One play from going to state, which had never happened for any team from this area, much less an upstart school of a couple years old. So it was kind of it was a great season, but it was like a heartbreaking season all at the same time.
Heartbreaking end, yeah.
And but then I was like, oh wait, all the receivers are graduating. I was like, I've been like two or three deep,
and the quarterback,
So I'm like 2 or 3 deep on the depth chart. Like I'm the next guy to come up. Like I'm like, if I work hard and get my speed up and really study you. I was like, this is like an amazing thing. I was thinking like he could be on one side, I'm playing on the other side. Like we're the starting wideouts, and in my head I thought this is my ticket to finally go to college, even if it's a crappy one,
D2 or
D3 like level Z college. I was like, I can finally go to college. My parents had no money, and I thought this is my chance. Like this is my opportunity. I'm on a team that was statewide ranked. We're going into our senior years. I'm on the depth chart. And I never forget this because we went to spring football, and I was starting. You were on one side, I was on the other, and I thought, this is it. Like, this is the best day of my life. Like everything I've worked hard for, I've killed myself in the gym the best I can to get good enough, and I'll never forget it. It's one dumb little play that I could never get, which was to do a crackback block on the linebacker. And no matter how many times I practiced it, no matter how many times I did it, I just didn't have it in me to know how to do that. And going into my senior year, realizing I had lost my dream. I had lost my position. And I, in my head I thought, I already knew I was going to the ministry. I was like, this is going to be pay for my college at a Bible college. I already had the school in mind and all this stuff, and I thought, it's done. Like I'll never get the position back. And I tell this story a lot of how disappointment, a setback can be a setback or a setup. And I realized probably going into my senior year, I think, I was like, I'm not going to play. Because the team was in turmoil. Like, we lost the first 2 games, and you ended up being the quarterback out of, like, necessity. And we were just in a tailspin. And I'll never forget the Lely game, which I've actually told this story on, like, messages I've done. The Lely game, out of nowhere, we're down by 2 touchdowns. I get put in the game. I'm put at the slot position. Again, I look over. There's Rob. He's right next to me. Like, I had the chance to turn this game around, to be the hero, to redeem myself, to get the scholarship. And the ball ricochets off my head.
Was it at that point in time that you realized?
I was like, I can never win. Like, I'm literally 6 yards from the end zone. I run the in pass, and he just, for some particular reason, threw it immediately before I even made the cut. So as soon as I turn my head, it goes, and the inside linebacker comes up and just creams me. And I just do the walk of shame all the way back. And, of course, we lost the game, and It was just like the beginning of this sort of tailspin. And and I was benched, and then like a couple games later, you give me a concussion, and I'm
couple
out.
Practices.
A couple practices later, you give me a concussion running across the middle. I never forget that too, because I was running a deep middle route, and I just remember like going, "Hey, I'm open," and then I'm like, "Hey, I'm on the sidelines."
How did I get from there to here?
How did I teleport in time through space and time?
How is there this gap in my memory?
And I've never had that bad of a concussion where like I have zero memory of what happened, and they were like, "You don't know what happened?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, I was running across the middle. Next thing I know, I'm on the side. They go, "Rob creamed you." I'm like, "What do you mean, Rob? Of all the people, Rob?" He's like, "Yeah, you missed the pass, and he just laid you out." And he goes, "Then you hit the ground, stood up, started talking, and collapsed." That's why we brought you here. They're like, "We think you have a concussion."
Hence the difference between you not being able to make a comeback or a crackback block.
I was like, "Wait, so who laid the hit?" They're like, "Rob did." And I look at him, I'm like, "Really?"
Just doing my job.
I was like, "You're supposed to be on my team, man." But so I was out for a couple games, and then I think that was when I realized is like, whether it's circumstances or lack of genetics or just whatever it is, this is not going to work out for me. But it's funny how I really stopped being so caught up in that.
Right.
And I was like, I was already leading a bunch of FCA meetings, and I was really, we were seeing a lot of turnaround in the football team because these were hardcore partying,
right.
redneck, go.
Oh, yes.
And these guys were now, maybe just by lip service, but they were staying out of some of that trouble. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like just dropping me in that has allowed me to be an influence.
Well, what you did, you set the foundation for changing peer pressure.
Yeah.
Because there was a negative peer pressure that they were always talking about going out here to the Yucatan and partying and doing all this other stuff. And then it wasn't all of a sudden, but it took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Then those conversations became silent.
Right.
Because it was no longer the cool thing to do.
And I think FCA was great because we provided an opportunity where you didn't have to do that.
Correct.
It was like after the game was over, and again, to his credit, for as much as, our FCA coach, God rest the dead, unfortunately he's passed away, but he did provide an outlet.
Yes.
He opened his house every night after the game.
Correct.
And that's became the new thing to do.
Yep.
And I can't help but think back and go, how many lives did he prevent from a drunk driving accident?
Yep.
Some pregnancy, God knows what he did.
Absolutely.
And so again, the year kind of progresses, and I realize we're both about to graduate, and there's 5 Division I scholarships. It's funny, even going 7-3 and we didn't even make the playoffs. Like
8-2.
8-2. Sorry, my bad. I was counting the playoff loss.
Yeah, the two games that we lost were the first 2.
So it's funny how even with that, teams did not care. You know what I mean? They were like, Spire's got a Division I scholarship to FSU. And I remember thinking, like, I was really concerned about you. Not that I could just make you do whatever I wanted you to do, but I was like, I'm really concerned that he's going to go off to some school, and this is all that's been in his life is going to end because he's going to get into some party in school and whatever. And I don't know why I took you to Southeastern College. They didn't even have a football team.
I remember going. I think I was like sleeping on the floor or something.
Yes, we all slept in a dorm. And I'm going to put this picture up. I have a picture of us in that spot. It's one of my favorite pictures. But I'll never forget this. You were like always bent on going to Southern Methodist University. Do you remember this?
I think that was from my parents.
Yeah,
I think my parents,
because they were like a wide receiver type school or something.
No, because my parents were Methodist.
Gotcha.
So didn't know the Lord, but grew up. When I say I grew up in a Methodist church, we went around Christmas
time and Easter. CEO.
So and that's really my family's all from South Bend, so it was all Notre Dame, and well, if you're not going to Notre Dame, then we're Methodist. So and it was all just fluff, but Liberty was great for me. Obviously, I met my wife, and
well, it's funny. So that kind of came out of nowhere, right? Liberty reached out to you out of nowhere. Or were they always trying to recruit you?
No, they were always trying to recruit.
They were.
Me.
So you weren't at first. You were like, no.
Correct.
Because you thought it was just going to be a crappy football school? Or?
Correct. Well, but then when we went up there for the trip, I'm looking at this place, going, man, this place is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And now it's even more unbelievable.
Right. It's phenomenal now.
But no, it was a great. they're a little more liberal than what I'm used to now in my walk, but it's very different because they took the foundation that was built here that you helped with and really helped it to blossom into the importance of my own spiritual walk and spiritual leadership.
So we only got a few minutes left, so I'm gonna put a quick fast forward on this. So again, you graduate. I was like, awesome. He's going off to Liberty. That's a Christian school. That's probably one of the best, that type of schools. And I thought, okay, he's in good hands, right? But this is pre-social media. This is it's not like you can be like, I'm gonna text you every day and see how you're doing. I was like, well, that's it. He's going to go his way. I'm going to go my way, and that's really what happens in high school.
Right.
What I mean? You go your separate ways, and you hope the best, and maybe someday in 10 years you'll see each other. But I really honestly thought, I'll probably never see this guy again. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I thought in my head. And so, fast forward from my life, this is where it gets really bizarre. I going to start doing Christian rap. Actually, funny because I broke my nose out this pole vault pit. That's a whole nother story with a different person. But I'm reading, years later, I'm full-time in the music. I am traveling. I'm still here in the town. I didn't go anywhere. And I never forget, I open up the newspaper, and it says, local coach impacts players for Christ through FCA. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I wonder who this is. That's really cool. I've been 15 years removed from FCA. And I look closer, I'm like, wait a minute, that's Rob. Mm-hmm. And I'm reading, I'm like, wait a minute, there's no freaking way. And sure enough, you came back and became the football coach.
Correct.
How weird was that?
Very weird. In fact, when I came here as just an assistant football coach, we had for the first 2 years we lost every game. Right. We were 0-20. So you want to talk about as a player
dynasty death.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then looking at that, and it was very, very weird to see how it digressed so much. But then I had the opportunity to become the head coach as a third-year coach, and the Lord impressed it on my heart to instill in the kids. There is a separation of church and state, so it's not forcing.
Right.
But it's still planting seeds and laying the foundation for hard work, for dedication, for the things that you and I learned from Coach Rolls and Coach Jones and those other coaches. And it was very, very weird and very different, but now it's a whole different aspect of now you're influencing those kids, and you look in their faces and you say, that was me. And
the funny thing was that you being a coach, you have to obviously toe the line that you're not trying to endorse a certain faith, or you're not trying to use your platform to proselytize and things like that.
Correct.
So, and I think you've always done a great job with that. And anybody that's a person of faith in the public school system, that's probably a daily thing you have to figure out. But the funny thing was, I always remember you were like, listen, I can't come in here and do anything outside of just answer a question if somebody asks me. You go, but would you mind coming and speaking to the kids? Because you're just a person.
Right.
And I thought, how full circle is this? It's I looked at him one time and I'm like, you realize we're right where we started 15 years ago.
Same gym.
Does this mean we're not going anywhere in life? Or we're just running a lap like it's high school track again? And it's been really cool to see, over the years, that I have never left the community. I still do my music, but to be able to still come back, do a public school assembly here, to I mean, you name it. I'm sitting in the room right now where I would be scared to death to be sitting in this room all these years later. But yeah, man. So that was really about it. So I actually literally have to go speak to FCA upstairs at the football team.
Yep. Yes, you do. And I believe my son's coming down to pick you up.
Okay, awesome. So I just want to say thank you. You're awesome, and if you could see him right now, he has a weird. He had a tree fall on him.
I got a shoe
from
on
the hurricane.
Now, so.
But yeah, man. So I always just thought that was a really interesting story, and thanks for everything. kj52 podcast.
It's time to give a game face on. I'm about to give a game face on. Game face all day, a day, all time. Drop these gems up on your head like an avalanche in a diamond mine, and you chasing that $1 sign. I'm chasing at my garden. I'm placing my faith up in this race, and I run this race. It's the bottom line, and I game now. I try to find who's down to ride and roll with me, and I'm game face up here tonight. Cause how you died and who you be, and I'm going in, I'm showing in just what you give and done for me, and I know I live. I know my sin is gone, and I've been redeemed. I'm feeling like a beast. someone let me out. I'm feeling like I'm free, someone let me out. You feeling just like me and someone let you out. Then get up on your feet, it's game time. Let me hear you shout. Going in for the win. Body full of adrenaline. Turn in my zone, going hard like I'm LeBron. Watch me take it home, take it home. Watch me take it home, take it home. Turn it up, then I'm off in the trunk with a pack and I'm off in the blast in the vocal. Put it out for the rap and the joke, for the cats and the off for the rap and the chokehold. I'm packing the laugh and the faggots, I'm packing the mac and I'm packing the no-dos. I'ma break it down, take it down, make a sound, kinda fast if it's slow-mo.
KG, we the A-team. That hard work, we see action. They try to skip the label. Sit them boys in the C-section. We live this, no D-verdicts. And we got class, don't need credits. Train ourselves in godliness and it's obvious. You know the problem is that my click's strong and our wins long. Beast mode, don't switch off and our day start before it hits dawn. And we finishing when y'all getting up. I hate the pain when I wake the train. 5 a.m. I know light, but I'ma buckle down. Suffer now, cause I'ma be the champ for my whole life. OKG against my team, y'all boys won't float like Macy's. They parade on the money they make it on, but that money won't save them. See, they think that my guys won't break them. Take them down, they don't really wanna wake us. Haters come, they don't really wanna play us. You boys better step up, stand and take them, they know.
KJ, thought you never see the day. Let me on this remix. Tell me, homie, what's the play? He said zone out. He said zone out. He said zone out.